Hello and welcome to another episode of Wildly Tarot podcast. I am here today with of the first of many episodes where I will be interviewing people who inspire me and inspire my work and my journey, and having conversations with how that relates to a specific archetype in the tarot deck. So these first 22 conversations will be around the major arcana of the tarot. And today I'm really, really excited to introduce a new Instagram friend, Dan, to the show. We're going to be finding out a bit about her work as well as diving into the archetype of the High Priestess. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here and honored to be with you and get to talk about all the beautiful, juicy things.
Yeah. So if you could just share with us who you are and what do you do?
Okay, awesome. So my name is Dan Arhakos. So basically I started out as a yoga and meditation teacher. I was working in the school systems in New York City with special needs children. And then on the side, I was working with special needs adults. And I just realized that bringing in yoga, meditation, and mindfulness was a huge part of not just my life, but incorporating it in theirs allowed them space and grace to move through things easily. And within doing that, I then realized that I wanted to be able to share that not just with the special needs population. So I'm a Reiki master, I'm an Akashic record reader. I lead multiple circles for the new moon and the full moon. I lead breath work. And yeah, I'm not really sure how I've got here, but I'm honored to be here in this lifetime and do what I do, and to also be called onto this podcast by someone as beautiful as you and as inspiring as you are to me, and be able to sit with the archetype of the High Priestess is such an honor and a blessing. So thank you so much for giving me this space.
Oh, you are so welcome. I'm really, really excited to see how this unfolds.
Likewise.
Yeah. So tell me, what's alive for you today? How is your mind and heart and body and soul feeling?
So everything is really beautiful today. But it's definitely, I'm currently traveling from New York to New Hampshire. I work at an ayahuasca church, so I'm headed back there for another ceremony, which is so beautiful. But within working with the plant medicines and with working with the metaphysical medicine that we have in this life, sometimes it can be kind of a whirlwind. So I'm riding this really beautiful ebbing and flowing wave of, let me just surrender to the fact that I'm going to do this podcast on the road. Let me just also surrender that I'll get there when we get there. But like a major excitement in my belly for all of the things that, like, yes, I've manifested, but also when you really choose to hold on to the idea of surrender and
Mm.
understand that it's going to unfold the way it's going to unfold, and it's going to work out the best way because you're just letting life be. So I get excited that this is the way I get to live my life. So that's kind of like where I'm at.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That really truly sounds like a piece of the High Priestess that surrendered
Mhm.
to the great mystery.
Oh, yes. When I think of the High Priestess, that's one of the first things I think of, is like the feminine mystery that is so vast. And sometimes hard to understand because we're not necessarily taught in school to surrender to things, to let what's going to happen. We're human beings. We're really funny and silly. And we like to think that we can, call the shots on the next few things that are happening. But in reality, that mystery is the biggest part of the journey. And there's sometimes darkness in there, but even within that darkness, there's beauty.
Mm.
So like grabbing hold of the fact that the mystery is that beautiful in between place. We start here and we're like, oh, I want to get here, but that journey and that mystery within the journey is everything that's juicy. And that's another thing that I think of with the High Priestess is like juice. She's
Mm.
juicy.
She is juicy. And I love also that you're bringing in, she's not afraid of working with the dark places, with the subconscious, with the things that make us really uncomfortable.
Definitely. For me, we don't have, you know, we don't have one without the other. So if there's going to be light and the sun is out, we're also going to have shadows.
Mm-hmm.
And so our shadow sides and doing shadow work, most of the time people are like, I'd rather not do shadow work. It brings up quote unquote bad things. And I don't even like the word bad. I just like to say that they're just not good things. Like there's good and then there's not so good. But within the not so good, there are blessings in there. There are lessons for us to be with and really understand, okay, maybe this is something that I have to learn. And it doesn't always look beautiful from the outside. But some of the best things that I've learned are within the quote unquote darkness, are in those revelations of sticky and icky and sad and sometimes angry and maybe even like disappointment. Those are beautiful teachers. And I get that, sometimes we just want to dip our toe in and be like, okay, I'm going to hang out over here. But if we can allow ourselves to immerse in darkness, that is where we find the big, bold brightness, because then we're understanding that it's a duality. Everything's a duality.
Yeah. Would you be open to sharing with us some bit of darkness that you've skillfully moved through in this lifetime that has helped to really influence the work you're doing currently?
Thank you for that question. I would absolutely be honored to talk upon something like that. And once again, I just want to thank you for having me here. Like, this is so wonderful. And I'm excited to have this talk with you finally. You know what I mean? So in my life, when I was 15, I started going to therapy. And things were really beautiful. Because if those things didn't happen when I started, I had like my first panic attack. There was anxiety, there was depression. My parents didn't understand it. So we had to, on top of me going to therapy alone, we had to go to family therapy because my parents were just kind of like, you used to be so happy. Just go back to being happy. And a lot of times I work with people now that they tell me, they're like, I used to be so happy. Like, I just want to know, when am I going to be happy again? And I get that, but there is beauty in the times when we're not so happy and we're not so uppity. I have manic depression. So sometimes I have really high highs and really low lows. And that was also continued on with, I had quite a bad drug addiction with cocaine for a while, for about 4 years. It was like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That was all I needed, right? And within that, my mental illness problems started to become bigger and bigger because I was really just masking the fact that I was hiding my tarot cards. I was hiding my yoga mat. I was hiding the things that I studied because that's not what everyone wanted. Everybody wanted that fun Dan who was ready to go to the bar and who was ready to stay up all hours of the night. And I did love that part. And I still love that part of me, because I think within moving through things that have happened within mental illness, it's important to remember, like, those parts of you are beautiful. And although you may not like what you've done, because I've definitely done things that I think about and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've screwed people over. I've lied. I've made mistakes, but my mistakes are the biggest lessons that I've been blessed with. And so I'm so grateful for it. When I stopped, I was the one that told my parents, I was like, I have a problem and I need to get help. When I stopped doing all of the drugs and all of the alcohol, it gave me more of a clear head. But then I went on antidepressants. I'm very grateful for my antidepressants because if I didn't start taking them in 2016, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I say that because they brought this, like, it felt like a baby elephant sat right on my chest for a while. And it was like the baby elephant was lifted and could move and I could breathe again. So I was able to go back to doing yoga. I was able to go back to chanting. I was able to go back to divination. Because at some point I was like, no, I don't want to do that. That stuff isn't what's going to make me feel better. when at the end of the day, I knew that was the stuff I loved. But I was in a headspace of, I don't want to see beauty. I want to sulk in the darkness. And I did. And I'm glad that I did. But what I realized while I was kind of in that place after a while was that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And it sounds super cliche, but that light at the end of the tunnel was that when we sit with the darkness, if the darkness presents itself to us and we decide to sit with it, we get to come out on the other side. And that other side is understanding that your darkness is okay. That when you have a bad day or if I'm having a low moment, I'm going to nurture it like a baby. I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, you're being so stupid, or oh my gosh, you're being so annoying, or oh my gosh, I wish you would just stop crying. I mean, sometimes you cry so much that you're like, what? I'm exhausted. I wish I could stop crying. But nurture that part of you like you would a 2-year-old who is just going through the motions, the motions of the emotions that we have.
Right.
And so that was where I really found that, like, it's totally okay for me to feel this way. It's okay for me to be this way. And that has allowed me to sit with so many others on their spiritual path and so many not on their spiritual path that come to work with me, that I've been able to say, like, you're normal. Like, this is you and you're beautiful. If you didn't feel this way, you wouldn't be you. Sometimes that's hard to hear. But I also think it's really rewarding to hear, because as you start accepting places that society tells you, no, you shouldn't, then you get to that, like, high priestess mystery revelation.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like you've really been able to employ this archetype of the high priestess in choosing what tools you needed at any given time in order to work with the animal body.
Being a human is wild. We are unbelievable beings. We can do some really crazy things if we, once again, that word surrender, if we surrender to the fact that we are unbelievable. We're pure magic, and as silly as it can sound sometimes, like, we are creating everything that comes in front of us. So for me, getting back to a place where I understood, okay, I might be feeling dark today, but I can also still, if I only do, and mental illness, it can be really difficult to move through. If I give myself 15 minutes to do yoga, if I even pull just 2-3 cards today, and maybe I journal for half a page, then you know what? I can reward myself with still laying down for an hour or so. And over time, the reward that you give to yourself, either it becomes something else. Maybe you can go and, treat yourself to, like, a cup of tea at a little tea cafe. Or it becomes, like, at one point I used to, I would literally buy myself yoga classes. If I got through the week, I'd be like, okay, if I do something every single day this week, I will make sure that I'm going to physically reward myself with a good yoga class. And that was actually how I started on my Reiki path, was I would reward myself with Reiki sessions. I'd be like, okay, you have to go to work today. Went to work, got a Reiki session at the end of the week, and that was really exciting for me. And then I had someone say to me when I was having a really low day that I was 19, and she was like, you're going to be a Reiki master. Are you ready to, like, go on that journey? And I looked at her, and at the time I knew I was about to become a yoga teacher. So my response was, honestly, that sounds like a lot. I think I'm just going to stick to teaching yoga. And so through her saying that and the seed being planted, I started to realize, wait a minute, this is something that helped me. If I go down the path of becoming a Reiki master, I can, and which is exactly what I do today, I can turn to someone else and let them know, like, at some point, what you see in me, if this is what you crave, it's already yours. Manifestation.
Yeah. So it sounds as though this journey of your life has really been expanding your capacities to be able to be of service in a lot of different ways.
150%. I am honored. Like I said, I'm on my way to go to another ayahuasca ceremony. Working with plant medicine was always something that I wanted to do. I have no idea how I was able to um gratefully receive this position that I'm in, that I get to sit with people that, when they take that medicine, they're shown every darkness and every lightness simultaneously. And for me, what's beautiful is, it's only in a 6-hour ceremony. But for me, I've sat there in real life and I've been like, okay, it's been 6 years of doing this, you know? So I'm like, okay, I know how to handle this one. And, we've got all the tools that we have in our back pocket by expanding. And the toolbox is expansive because no one situation, everything's not going to require a hammer. Sometimes you're going to need a screwdriver. Sometimes you're going to need a wrench. So like the experience of life and allowing life to unfold for us, not to us, because I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, this is happening to me. Like, no, it's happening for us. Even when I was getting stressed out before that, I'm like, oh my goodness, I wanted to be in the place that I could sit down and have my laptop up nice and I could have my nice warm cup of tea. But also I'm at this beautiful little park right now and I'm getting to have a lovely conversation with someone that I admire. How can I not surrender to that?
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm being reminded, one of the things that I really am so impressed by you with is the content that you put out regularly on Instagram. You really like to put out what some people consider to be edgy content, even though for myself, it's like a breath of fresh air to see someone talk about menstrual blood and to see someone posting pictures of them sunbathing outdoors, very normal and natural things, but to just witness you holding that frequency of I am in this body and I'm okay with it. I would love to hear you speak about what that feels like and what you receive from that, both positive and maybe not preferred.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you so much for this question. Thank you so much. So I appreciate that you enjoy the content. You know, it's really funny because every once in a while I sit back and I'll be like meditating and I will literally turn to myself like in my mind, how we all do that in meditation. I'm like, you are butt naked on Instagram. Like, what are you doing right now? What is wrong with you? And I'll have that like few minutes where I'm like, oh my goodness, this is my life. Um, but also at the same time, it's extremely liberating that I can say, this is my body. Why would I hide it? This is what I do as a human being. Why am I being shamed for it? And what I think is interesting is people do shame me for it. Both of my parents have Instagram. Both of my parents see me butt naked. They see me at my house, if I'm around them and I'm bleeding, they see me take my menstrual cup out and put it into a jar. And then they see me painting with it. They see me putting it on my face, using it as a face mask. Like they're used to it. Of course, as parents at first, they were kind of like, this is our child, and sometimes it's really funny. If I am at my mom's house and I post something, I've heard her off in the distance. She'll be like, oh my God. Oh, Dan Marie, I open Instagram and there are your boobies. And I hear her in like another room just going, oh my Lord, like over and over again. And then after it, in like, say like 15 minutes, she comes to me and she goes, that picture of you is gorgeous. Like at first she's kind of like, okay, I'm still your mom. But then as a human being, there's the book, Women Who Run with the Wolves.
Yeah.
Oh man, I read it every time I do a yoni steam or I'm bleeding. It's like my Bible.
Mm.
And my mom's read it as well. And both of us reading that together really brought us together, because in today's society, where I grew up, Staten Island, New York, I'm the fifth borough, the conservative borough. We're the only red borough. So there's that, which can be really intense for somebody like me who's very whimsical, to say the least, if you get what I'm saying. And so where I grew up, I am usually the one that it's like, Dan, what are you doing? When I started saving my menstrual blood, because I learned that it was good for all my houseplants. And I learned it was good for my garden. I was like, oh my gosh, like I can give it back to the earth. All of my friends would come over and they would be like, what is that jar? I would leave it on my altar, like if it wasn't all done yet, I'd leave it on my altar for divination. And, they'd be like, what's that jar? And I would tell them. And at first the looks were very strange. Then over time, my friends were like, I have a beautiful relationship with my menstrual cycle. Like I get excited. I know every day that I'm on, you know what I mean? I'm on day 23 right now, so I'm getting super excited to bleed soon. And I brought it to Instagram because I knew that there were other women like me who were also doing the same thing. But a lot of us are hesitant to put that out there because of the backlash that I even have received. There's a comedian, Tom Segura, and he and his wife brought me up on their podcast. It's called Your Mom's House, and they were very confused by it. She said to him, she was like, would you stay married to me if I did this? And he was like, no, it's gross. Like, that's weird. I was super excited. A lot of people were like, oh my goodness, Dan, like, I'm so sorry that they were talking about you. I took it as a compliment. That means what I'm doing triggered you into having a full-blown conversation about it, that a lot of people watch his podcast. So in my heart of hearts, I would like to think that at least 1 out of every 10 of those people that saw it was like, wait a minute, I can get close to my period blood. Because the video that they showed was me saying, when I write down my manifestations, I'll paint with my period blood on top of it. If I want to do a cleansing ritual, I'll take a rock and I will literally cover it in my blood, and then I will bathe it clean. Like, I'll use it on my face as a face mask. If I have eczema or I'm really dry, I'll also use it in that way. That usually helps me. I used to get eczema in the ditches of my arms, and that always really helped. A lot of people think that's weird, especially people where I'm from, kids that I went to high school with. I went out like not too long ago, and people were like, so and so was talking about you. They were saying how disgusting you were. Once again, I appreciate being the topic of conversation. I am a Leo rising, so I love being the center of attention. But my thing was, if it bothers you that much, there's a reason. Now, maybe you've just literally never heard of it before, but even if it's just my naked body doing yoga outside, why does it make you so uncomfortable? Because you feel like you can't be in your skin outside. I think everybody has a perfect body in their own way, but by all means, I don't have a model perfect body.
Right.
I love my stretch marks. I love my little folds. You know what I mean? Like, I love all of that, because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be in my own skin. And that's really what I try to let people know, is like, also with me playing with my period blood, if I didn't do that, I would not be this Dan. Like, there are just things that I like to share with the world to remind them, like, if this is something that you like, be proud. Because it makes you different than the person next to you. Even if both of us like to do the same thing in some capacity, it still makes us our uniqueness. Because what you do with your menstrual blood or with your beautiful naked body is always going to be different from what I might be doing. But still, we're empowered by standing in our own, is by saying, listen, I don't care it can be disgusting when like things are overly sexualized. But
Yeah.
like, listen, I'm not in this for you and your comfort, sir.
Or your
I'm in it,
pleasure.
or your pleasure, or your pleasure. You
Yeah.
do you, my friend. Um, for me, it's the fact that like this is the way I feel comfortable. When I have the chance to, I lay outside naked. And although people see a problem with that, of course I'm not going to do it if there's a preschool right there. That is not what we're saying. But if I'm in the privacy of the woods by myself, or I'm staying at my house and I want to go in the backyard and I want to be like, ooh, this is my body. I have friends with kids that are now very used to nude bodies because they're used to seeing their parents nude, or the parents and their friends that like wear way less clothes than we're used to in this day and age. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it is very funny to get feedback though, because people usually aren't in the middle. They're usually like, yo, I love that. Or they're like, I'm going to continue scrolling and possibly mute you, maybe unfollow you, or say something to try to get a rise out of you.
Right.
And
Right.
usually when they try to get a rise out of me, it makes me excited. I triggered you. You can learn something. I can learn something. Thank you for this teaching.
Yeah, I really hear you describing like this quality of the high priestess as being shameless and utterly empowered with who she is.
Beautifully put. Like, there, you know what? And in some way, shape, or form. So when I was growing up, by the time I was in 8th grade, I had a triple D chest. So I was very large. I'll never forget. I was like 13 at the beach with my mom and like her friends and their kids. And some guy came up to me and was like, I would motorboat your chest, or whatever. He said it in a worse way, but like with that, and used the word motorboat. And I was so grossed out. And my mom and all of her friends started freaking out because I'm 13.
Mm.
And so for a few years, I was like, well, I can't show people my body because
Mm.
people are just gonna, it's my fault that I make people feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I stuck with that for a while. And I think even when I was abusing drugs and alcohol, it was like, okay, no, I like feeling sexy, but I can't be too sexy because then I'm the problem. Oh
Yeah.
no. Oh
Yeah.
no. We have now come to terms with the fact that like being free allows me to feel happier.
Mm.
Instead of feeling that elephant on my chest that I used to feel when people would look at me, now I'm like, all right, you're either accepting it or you're not. And I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me.
Mm. I love that. You're really speaking to at least how I feel women in general can be really culturally gaslit about the fact that they are provoking such responses from male bodies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Going to college in Brooklyn, we're 18, 19 years old, going out and enjoying ourselves. And men of all ages do not care how young you look. In some instances, I think the younger you look, the better. And there were times when I would get angry, and I would go back at someone and I would be like, excuse me, what did you just say to me? And I'd have some random guy on the street who was just catcalling me be like, what, you think you're just gonna walk around here and now you're not even gonna take my compliment?
Mm.
And it's like, especially being young, I was confused by that.
Mm.
Like, no, you're not actually complimenting me. You're in a way, you're making me uncomfortable, obviously, but in a way, it feels like you're tearing me down.
Mm.
And especially, we even spoke about it the other night with another friend that I have that lives in the city. She was just recently groped on the subway. She had just had knee surgery. She fell. And she was like, in that moment, she was on the floor staring up and she was like, oh my goodness, I'm helpless right now. Like,
Mm.
it's, and when he just looked at her and then he walked away, and she was like, in that moment I was so grateful that he chose not to attack me. We shouldn't feel that way. And now she's like, she's changing everything she wears because she's like, I don't want people to feel provoked by me. And my heart hurts because I know that's sadly a truth. You know, like it's definitely, I've even been in, you know, working in the plant medicine community. I've been in situations where you know, people come in, they think, oh, it's a spiritual community, so that stuff doesn't happen here. It definitely still happens in the spiritual community, even when people say that they're accepting and that they're encouraging, you know. So it's kind of sad, but I think it also brings power once again back to the women, that we are always vigilant.
Right. That is a piece of the high priestess. We don't lose our discernment just because
Yes.
we liberate ourselves. We're still in an unwell society that is evolving to keep our bodies safe.
And it's really unbelievable that as time keeps going on, and you know, like I've seen changes in the last 5 years in society, that like I can, you know, there are people like you and so many others who support me in what I do. Whereas 5 years ago, it was still, you know, people would still call me weird because I would go and I would chant, you know, in Sanskrit. I'd go to kirtan yoga and people would be like, you're so strange. But now it's cool to do, which is interesting to be in this world throughout these times. I'm very honored because I feel like there's a lot of misdirection that we can go down. But once again, misdirection and mistakes allow us to see things clearer on the other end. It's a very back and forth kind of, I'm grateful for it, and then I'm like, ooh, why does that have to happen? And I'm like, oh, because that's the universe teaching us again.
Yeah. And a lot of what I'm hearing you describe, it sounds like practices that you have cultivated over the last few years. And I'm equating that here with the high priestess. I think about high priestess and I think about ritual. Do you feel as though the life that you're cultivating and the work that you're cultivating, it's like this mastery of practice?
150%. Like it's almost like I've said it before, life is ceremony. We are pieces upon an altar for life. You know, we have our own altars when we go and we sit there for ceremony and we look at the altar and we're like, oh my gosh, how pretty. But sometimes things on the altar, they get dusty. They need to come back off. You know, they need to be moved around. And that goes the same for us. So for me, my living rituals, you know, the things that I do every day, the powers that I call upon every day. And by powers, I don't mean that I'm like, you know, bringing in this, I'm sitting by my cauldron, although sometimes it is like that. But every day I'm not sitting by my cauldron, you know, bringing down this, you know, big booming lightning bolt. However, when we sit there with our decks that we know and love very well, they know us, we know them. When I sit there with my crystals that I work with, we know them, they know us. You know, when I call upon those spirit guides and those entities and those loved ones that work with me metaphysically, when I sit down with the plant medicines, it's a big reminder that like, I wanted this and I've received it. I stay the course because I know this is what makes, I always say this and people normally have an interesting reaction. It makes my insides orgasm. To just be able to be like, you know what, when it's the morning, I love to sit down and I do this thing where I say 6 things that I'm grateful for as soon as I wake up and as soon as I go to bed. And I just sit there with myself cross-legged and I'm like, okay, I say it out loud. I'm like, 6 things I'm grateful for, you know. When I see the mirror for the first time in the morning, I'm always like, I love you, you're amazing, keep doing a good job. Even on the days where my mental health, you know, doesn't feel that it's in the best place,
Mm-hmm.
those are even more, in my opinion, of an important day for me to say, you know what? I'm going to do maybe a cord cutting ceremony today. Or I'm going to do a ritual with my blood to remind myself how powerful I am, that this blood comes from me.
Mm.
And there's beauty in it. There's power in it. There's life in it.
Mm.
Life is a ritual.
Life is a ritual. Yes, yes. Ah, that needs to be on a t-shirt.
Right? As I said it, I was like, oh, you know, when you kind of let them talk through you. I had that after those words came out. I was like, oh, good for you guys.
Oh, yeah, Dan. So picturing this archetype of the high priestess, I would love to hear, like, what does she look and smell and taste like? What does this archetype feel like to you?
To me, okay, I love this question. I think this is so juicy and so beautiful. Wow. I love your mind. Thank you so much for existing. So, for me, what she looks like is it's angelic, right? So she's got these big, beautiful wings, but they're not white. They're actually quite dark. So I feel as though her wings come into play because she can hold all of this space around her. She also moves effortlessly through the wind, and her wings are what keep her feet off the ground so that she moves so effortlessly. But within those wings, there's these beautiful, like, emerald colors. There's these royal blues. And I don't necessarily know if, like, she has a face or not, but she's very ethereal. And she's just this ray of sunlight that I would imagine, you know, when I think about, I do a meditation on the sun and I just think about a golden ray of light. That's what I think of. So she's got that golden, she's got that bright, she's got that holiness. But she is mysterious because we can't necessarily see her face and her body. And she does understand that there is duality in life. So that's why her wings are so dark. And she's just a powerhouse. She's just a powerhouse of grace and ease.
Yeah.
I'm trying to. Yeah, what does she taste like? She tastes like, I love this one. I've been thinking about this I've been thinking about it so hard. I meditated on it, and the first thing that I thought of was actually sangria. Was like a deep, like almost like pomegranate sangria. That it's sexy and it's juicy and it is very feminine. But also at the same time, it's almost grounding. And like, yes, my wings keep my feet off the floor so that I can effortlessly move, but my wings do touch the ground because I know that taste for me is almost like uplifting, but also grounding. And then when I think of the smell, my first reaction, and I'm not really sure why this was like, I thought of my eucalyptus plant. Because for me, that's so uplifting. You know, like I have it in the shower and I'm like, ooh, it smells great in here. Even if I don't smell so good, I'm like, ooh, okay, at least the shower does. And so with that plant, I just thought, like, if she was to come through with a burst of energy, it would be clearing in an angelic way. And that's what eucalyptus means to me.
Beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
And those are so many, what I would perceive to be positive qualities of the high priestess archetype. I'm curious, are there any qualities of this archetype that make you uncomfortable or that you are resisting stepping into in your work?
I would say yes. So my resistance with the high priestess archetype is that I can be too feminine. I can get really wrapped up in it being that I have to flow. that like when I thought about who I kind of want to embody more, it's like the emperor. You know, because he's got that very protective, not that the high priestess isn't protective, but like myself, she's very whimsical. She's very willing to fly with the wind. She's very willing to go with things. And that's great. But sometimes we got to reel it back in. And so I see it in myself that the archetype of the high priestess makes me nervous to also be so mothering. That nurturer, that like, you know, I don't have any children, but I could only imagine what it feels like to have a child in you for 9 months, give birth to a child, and then want to let them go, live your own life. What do you mean? You know, and there's that, what is it? The tyrant mother can kind of like take over. And I see that in myself with some of my friends sometimes where I'm like, no, you're mine. Or like my brother, you know, he's been more of my son growing up than my brother. And so sometimes I see that in him that I'm like, you know, we're working on not needing each other as much. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you don't need me? You know, is that like, well, I'm, you know, not saying that the high priestess always thinks like this, but like, I'm the high priestess. What do you mean you don't need me right now?
Yeah. So sort of like the shadow side of this archetype, if it gets unbalanced.
150%. If you're not willing to see that there is, once again, there's duality to everything. So she does have that darkness. She does, or at least in my opinion, for me embodying it, she and I have wanted it to be all about us at certain points. And although it's beautiful to embody the fact that you are power, that you are strong, so are other things around you. And giving leeway to saying, let's not float all the time. You know, I have a stellium in 7 placements of Libra, so I am up in the air all the time. And for me, the high priestess also shows that, you know, that we're in this very heavenly space. Whereas we need that balance to find the ground again, the dirt between our toes. And that's why when I think of what I get nervous to embody with the high priestess is that unbalanced place where I almost would like to place the emperor and his, you know, more kind of like a really sweet dad-like energy. Like, I'm gonna hold it down, I'm protecting you, and you're safe. Not that she's not safe, but it's in a very different way.
Right.
The divine feminine and the divine masculine separately are powerhouses. But when we bring them together and we find the midpoint, I feel like we can understand the world and how we interact with other beings in the world so much more. And I get lost in the high priestess archetype, definitely at times.
Oh, yes. The Libra in me sees the Libra in you. Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you. I love that. Well, that was so funny. I love it when I keep bringing up my placements. You're like, oh, there it is.
Oh, well, I'm curious, what sort of practices are you utilizing right now to try and invite that emperor in?
So for me, it's been a lot more journaling. It's been looking at myself as, you know, I'm writing down I think at a certain point, I just kind of stopped journaling what was going on with my feelings. I would only journal if I was doing specific journal prompts and, you know, if I had received messages and wanting to write them down, or I did a card reading and there was a message that came through that I needed to know. I stopped writing down, like, you know, like if I was to write today, I'd put today's date, day 23. And then I'd say, I'm excited. I have a great day ahead of me, but also I'm anxious because things can change. So I've started to write things like that down and I read it back. And I'm like, okay, that's okay because you're safe. You're still here. Another thing for me, I use tapping to bring myself to the present moment. EFT tapping has I think that was one of the first things my therapist gave me when I was 15. And if I feel too high priestessy, too Libra-like, and I'm flying in the air, if I start doing the tapping on the meridians, I can kind of come to a place of, once again, okay, I'm safe. I'm here. Everything's going to be okay. Even if my heart is still racing, even if I'm kind of like, I am thinking all over the place right now. And another one is having my feet on the bare ground, which I've always done. Although as of the winter, my partner, I have never ever put my feet in the snow. And that exactly that face. And like, it is extremely uplifting in the most grounding way that I've ever experienced in my whole entire life.
Wow.
And so like, that takes me from, being like, okay, I'm definitely feeling some anxiety, and maybe I'm getting a little hot, my mind is racing all over the place, to that's okay. And this is the moment that I'm focused on. My feet are right here in the ground. I look around, look up at the Father Sky, look down at the Mother Earth, look around me and go, this is exactly where I'm meant to be. And although I can't stay on the ice or the snow for too long because it starts to hurt and I'm new to it, I'm so grateful for it. So that's been really nice, because now as we're getting back into spring, I'm like, ooh, this is what I know, the grass. But being able to stay with that coldness for the last few months, for at least a few minutes, every day or every other day, has been a big reminder to come back down. Enjoy the fact that I'm human. Yes, I have these connections. So use them in meditation, use them in Reiki. However, enjoy them. Also, I'm trained in what's Chios energy healing. And for me, when I got trained in it, my teacher asked me what the difference was between Chios and Reiki. And I said, I was like, Chios reminds me of the male energy. That like all encompassing, not overbearing, but like a big bear hug, a warm cup of soup that comes right to your heart and is really nice and settling. So all of these things, using the Chios energy and also using the little other things that I've got going on that are tools in my toolbox, has really allowed me to see, like, I can find a balance. Even though I tend to be more on this side, I admit that. I can find that midpoint. And even if it's only for a little while that I get to bask in the midpoint, I bask in it. And I'm grateful for it.
So beautiful. So beautiful. I want to acknowledge that it's so evident to me how much work you've done to get to this place where you can, track yourself so intimately. And for those who might be watching or listening to this who maybe aren't quite so far along the path, I'm curious, what are some markers for you where you can tell that the mind and the body are not in sync, where there's dissonance?
Yeah. So yeah, I love that question. Thank you. That non-alignment feeling is very human. So like, first off, just recognizing that you're like, if you're new to spirituality or a spiritual path or whatever it is that you want to call it, maybe it's just, this is your new self-care, taking more time for you, because some people, that's what they like it to be. When we are worried, I've been in this place, about what everyone around me or everyone around you is thinking about what you're doing, whether it's the fact that you wanted to go to a yoga class or something as easier, you wanted to buy a deck of cards. And the people that are surrounding you aren't necessarily uplifting you with that. That's a place where, like, that's been a marker for me to be like, wait a minute. I love these people, but I also love this for me. And so what's important for me is to honor me, because they're still honoring them. Like I said, I had friends that they still honor themselves. They still go out and they're partying all the time, and kudos to them. But that wasn't my way. I like to have fun every once in a while, but my way is I'd rather sit at the altar, light the candle, and go through a divination session with myself. I remember at one point in high school, there's like photos of me in the back of like house parties doing yoga next to the pong table. Like everyone's playing beer pong and I'm doing some sun salutations over there, just trying to get it in, because at the end of the day, I knew, I'm like, oh man, I didn't get to do yoga today. And people made me feel kind of bad about it. And I had to look within myself. Do I feel bad that I do that? Oh no. So what can I do for me? I'm going to give myself more time to me. Another thing I realized was the spiritual community can be a little overbearing. So there have been times when I've felt almost too grounded because I'm listening to a lot of the divine masculine around me. And then there's the other spectrum where the divine feminine has been embodied around me, which is beautiful, but sometimes to a point where I can't bring my head back out of the clouds. And everybody has their own thing that is theirs, but we can get lost in what other people use to heal themselves.
Yeah.
So for me, I would say that non-alignment of, do I feel good? Okay, maybe I felt good because their energy was so bright and vibrant that I was feeding off of it. But if they weren't there, would I still feel as good after? Like for me, I love wild dancing, but not everyone does. Do I still feel good if I would be in this room alone, doing this for me? And also giving yourself like forgiveness. That's been my number one thing when I feel misaligned or out of sorts, is that I'm doing the best I can do within the space, the capacity, the bandwidth that I have. So maybe I thought by now I would be way further along on my path, or I'd be able to balance my divine masculine and divine feminine. Okay, it has been years. I started doing yoga in like 2012. Okay, I am still working on that. And I think that is a life lesson, and just because I say it to people that come to work with me all the time, I think it's great that you think I have it all figured out, but you think I have it all figured out. I am telling you, I am figuring it out just like you are. So forgive yourself for being a human and for needing time to figure out what works for you. That will put you in the most divine alignment that you could ever ask for. And you don't even have to.
Yes, I really hear you speaking to this idea of agency. Like, it sounds like your service is really not to get people to do life your way, but to empower them into that sovereign state where they can find what their path is.
100%. And I do think that the high priestess does this. She can cradle, with a beautiful feminine energy of acceptance. I accept you for who you are, even if your path does not look the same as mine. Are you happy on your path? And if you're happy on your path, then I love your path because it's yours. At the end of the day, it's not mine. I have to have that discernment to know this is my path and that's your path. That puts you in alignment by accepting not everybody's going to have the same one as you. Like, a lot of time I feel like family, we get upset because it's like, how did I come from these people? And I am like this and they are like that. I have a cousin who thinks I'm a witch. First off, yes, I am. Thank you very much. And two, okay, your path is definitely different than my path is. And that's okay. And that's beautiful. And that's what makes being human.
Yeah. It's that again, that beautiful shameless quality. And what I'm hearing you also say is that you're helping to mirror boundaries for your clients so that they are not just living vicariously through you, but actually doing their own work.
It is really interesting, and I'm sure you've had the same things happen. How I know how people can they want to feed off of your energy.
Yeah.
And I appreciate very much so when people tell me that they love my energy, that my energy is amazing. Thank you so much. But I'm not, this fountain that can spew out all this water and still continue to spew out water. At the end of the day, if the fountain stopped spewing water, you'd walk away. So when I stop giving you all my energy, are you going to still find that loving energy within yourself? Because evidently what you see in me exists within you. So how can we find it so that, if you want to come and work with me and you want to continue your sessions, we can. But when I'm not around, you still feel that beauty within you. It is such a blessing to be able to be with people along their path. But I've definitely had points where I've been like, wait a minute, I have to give them more space to find where their power source comes from.
Yeah.
And I get it, because I've been there too, where I've been like, oh my God, I love this teacher. I just want to do everything with them. But at the end of the day, even though I want to do everything with them, they're a human and I am not their backpack. I cannot go all over the world with them. I can go to them for guidance when I need, but I have to be myself and my backpack of energy and my backpack of my own guidance. Because evidently, I love reminding people everything that I am doing. I did not create all of this today. I did not come up with all of these teachings. I did not come up with all of, these things that I passed down to other people. Maybe some things I was like, oh, I did this for myself and it really helped me. But 9 times out of 10, these are things that have been around always. How can you embody them? So the way I embody them might not feel great to you, but how can you embody it so you can take it as your own and live that life the way you see me and you say, I want to live like you? You can, but yours is going to look different than mine. And that's so beautiful. I'm so grateful that we're humans.
Yeah. And are there any elders or lineages that you would like to pay thanks and homage to that have really influenced your journey?
So I really owe so much to all of the Hindu and Buddhist traditions that I have studied. I mean, I started going to therapy, and right away, the therapist that I had, she's a Reiki master. And the first thing she said to me, she was like, you have to go to yoga. I went to yoga. There's a Tibetan museum on Staten Island. So I went to this yoga class, and this teacher was like, oh, there's a Tibetan museum and you can learn from some of the monks there. And those traditions, I grew up in a Catholic household. And as much as I loved going to church because I was able to talk to people in like, people that naturally were not in human form. It was easy for me to do there. So I liked it. However, I didn't agree with the teachings. When I was able to go to the Tibetan museum and I was able to talk with these monks and they started describing Buddhism and Hinduism, I was like, wait a minute. I get it. We're all, pretty much all of the scriptures say the same things, whether it's even Judaism, whether you go and you start studying a Muslim religion, at the end of it, all of them have such a beautiful, and that's what I learned within studying all of that, was at the core of it all, it's all about living the way that you've always wanted to live. And there are some, like, I don't resonate with Catholicism, because I feel a bit more strict. But being able to study, I studied in Thailand for about 3 months. And I studied with Master Rung, and he was absolutely wonderful and amazing. And he didn't say much. I learned so much from someone really only, saying, look at that flower. And that was the only lesson for the day. That was the lesson. And I had to realize all of these parts moved around. But at the end of the day, it was being a part of the cog that was moving around. So I'm so grateful that those things existed even when I was 15. And now I'm going to be 25. And I still hold all of those teachings so near and dear to my heart. I'm so grateful for it. Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
What a good reminder.
Yeah. Oh, Dan, thank you so much. This has been such a juicy conversation. I'd love it if you could let people know how they can work with you, find your work, or if you have any projects coming up you'd like to share.
I really appreciate you so much. Yeah. So basically what we're doing is twice a month, we're meeting for the new moon and we're doing holotropic breath work. And then for the full moon, we meet and we do a Reiki healing circle. So basically it's all over Zoom still because of the pandemic. And also the way it worked out is now we have friends that join from all over, not just the country, but the world, which is extremely exciting. So that's over Zoom. The best way to get in touch with me is through Instagram or through my website, which I'll give you all of that information. It's just my name and stuff like that. And to get private sessions, I've had people work with me for the last 2 years. And, I don't like to lock anyone in. I like them to know that we're creating a yellow brick road together. And if you're ready for that healing and you're ready to sit here and you're ready to be vulnerable, and even if you're like, I'm not ready to be vulnerable, but I do want to start somewhere, you're more than invited. And I would absolutely adore to figure out what's the best way for us to work together. So yeah, my Instagram is at Dana Arhakos. My website is danaarhakos.com. But I'll give you all of that so you can write it in for people because that last name makes absolutely no sense. Yeah, that is such an honor to have been here today. And I look forward to connecting with everybody after this gets out. I'm so grateful for you, Wild. Thank you so much for everything that you are, everything that you do, for your readings that you put out. I really appreciate the messages that you send. And I'm super happy that we have this friendship.
Me as well. Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate the edges that you're walking, and I support you wholeheartedly. Keep pushing the envelope, my friend.
I will. I definitely will. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Safe travels.
Thank you, love.